Jesus said, love your enemies. In the next verse, he says you're a bunch of pigs in the manure. So somehow that goes together, where you can want the best for other people, but you can say, your views are really spiritual mud pit. So let's look at Matthew 6:7, where this verse comes. Matthew 7:6 says, do not give what is holy to dogs. Do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Dogs and pigs were non-kosher in the Old Testament. Jesus' listeners on the Sermon on the Mount would consider them unclean. We're not under the law, so if we want to have a ham for Christmas, that's no problem. But his view of these people is that their viewpoints are unholy. Their viewpoints are filthy. So he would tell them he loved them, but your viewpoints and your behavior are filthy and unclean. They continually take Jesus' truth and throw them in the mud. So one application here is we can try to help people, but there is a point at which we can withdraw and not try day by day. Truth rejected can be truth withdrawn. It says in Proverbs 26, answer a fool according to his folly. So you give fools truth. Matthew 26:4, do not answer a fool according to his folly. And they would be like over and over and over and over and over. So they're both true. Try to help people, but might not need to do it all of the time. And Jesus is going to tell his listeners that are critics of him, he's not going to continually debate them. He's going to withdraw and telling the listeners, here's what is right. Now we're going to withdraw. So when we make Christmas cards to our unsafe friends, it's all right to have a message about Jesus in it. Tell them that they should trust in Jesus as Savior and see what happens. And if need be, then let it go for a while. Jesus will send out the 2x2 disciples in Matthew 10. We're almost there. Whoever does not receive you nor heed your word, you shall go out of their house, and out of that city shake off the dust off your feet, which the Apostle Paul actually did in Acts 13, 51 and 52. He had people that threw him out of the city. And Acts 13, they, Paul and Barnabas, shook off the dust off their feet and proceeded on, moved on to a new city. So this is particularly concerning people that are not relatives and are not around them all the time. Do what you can, but don't feel like you need to do it all of the time. Maybe withdraw. Help them from time to time, and then withdraw, and maybe once in a while. So that's good for verse 6, although I do have in my notes, which I'm going to throw away, I kind of wonder if they were not calling Jesus a pig and Jesus a dog. I kind of wonder if they weren't calling him this and he turns it on them. So that's a thought. Now, verses 7 and 8, it's about asking all the way through verse 11, but we're going to look at verses 7 and 8 by themselves. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks it will be opened. part of the reason I kind of split this up, because it's going to be about asking all the way through the section, is I'd like to stress about seeking and finding in the first part, and get back to asking when we read verses 9 through 11. There are a lot of seeking verses in the Bible. 164 in the Old Testament, 120 in the New Testament. Now, we're not going to look at them all, but there are a lot of seeking. Seek the Lord and you will find him if you seek for him with all your heart. Deuteronomy 4:29. So Moses said that, and Jesus is kind of giving them what they really already know. Because Moses already said it. Lots of First Chronicles verses. Let the heart of those who seek you be glad. So, quoting Moses, and then Chronicles, you'll be happier if you seek God. Chronicles 22:18, now set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord. A lot of times I do see decor and posters of this verse applied to the country, but it applied to Israel first. If my people who are called my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will heal their land. Ezra 7:10, Ezra set his heart to seek the law of God. And then Psalms 119 talks about seeking your precepts. Oh goodness, I have so many of these, but sometime look up seek in a concordance. Lots of seeking to find out what is true. I think seeking in Bible days was a lot more strenuous and a lot more intensive than we think of it nowadays. We think of a search on the computer. You know, type in a few lines and search for this. Not too strenuous. In those days, no telephones, no computers. They would go visit a house and nobody's there. The relatives are not here. Where are they? Let's go bug the neighbors. Where are they? And a lot more intensive searching for a missing person. It's more like when we see helicopters flying over and putting a light down here and they're looking for a missing person. Although it's not a sad thing, but in the Bible, seek God with intensity. And seek the Bible like Ezra would seek the law of the Lord. And seek from the book of the Lord, that's Isaiah 34:19. Seek his precepts, Psalm 119. Seeking and pursuing. And it says here, if you seek him, you will find. So I wanted to stress seeking out of verses 7 and 8. Now we're down to asking, verses 9 through 11. Or what man is there among you, or when his son asks for a loaf? Artos. Artos. This kind of sounds like the name for some of the bread products. Artos. Artesian. Looks for a loaf. Will he give him a stone? If he asks for a fish, he will not give him a snake, will he? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give what is good to those who ask of him? Now in the Lord's Prayer, give us our daily bread. Sufficiency, minimum. And, pray for sufficiency, pray for the minimum, but very often God will give beyond what is minimum. God will give more than sufficiency, more than survival. The picture here is like a good father. I don't remember our kids asking too much for fish. Bluebell ice cream and M&Ms. That's what they asked for. But anyway, fathers like to give the kids. the Lord's Prayer, prayer for daily bread, pray for sufficiency, but can ask for more. Now, kind of like if the Lord wills, can have more. Sometimes we don't know what the Lord's will is. And sometimes the Lord's will is best that we do not get what we ask for. But that's kind of up to Him. But we can ask, welcome to ask. James 4:2, you have not because you ask not. That was kind of close to picking for the scripture reading. I went around it and did John 16:24. But I'm going to use verse 12 now and get to the golden rule. Let's look at verse 12. In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you, for this is the law and the prophets. Well, if you want a whole summary of the Old Testament, I would say what the Old Testament teaches is God keeps His promises. That's an opinion. But if I had to pick what the Old Testament teaches, God keeps His covenants. God keeps His promises. What the Old Testament commands, love God first, love your neighbor as yourself. So God keeps His promises is what it teaches. What it commands, love God first, love your neighbor second. And I think verse 12 is kind of a way of teaching to love your neighbors. Now, in loving your neighbors, we would not make them a victim of any of the wrongs. We look at the great Ten Commandments. Do you want to be killed? No. Want to have adultery at your house? No. Want to have stealing? No. Want to have lying? No. So the commandments are actually very, very clear. Treat them like you'd want to be treated. But then there are a lot of things that really aren't in the commandments. It's just everyday life. They're not the top things. And sometimes in thinking of what should I do to other people, well, what do you want to have done to you? And that gives an answer as to what we should do to other people. What do you want to have done to you? I'm going to work on verses 13 and 14. Verse 13, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are fewer who find it. The end of the Sermon on the Mount, the wise man builds his house on the rock, the foolish man builds his house on the sand. Here are the numbers. Fewer people are going to build their house on the rock. Most people are going to build their house on the sand, and when the storm comes, it's going to fall and be destroyed. How many are there? More unsaved, fewer saved. Also, in terms of the unsaved, we think of I-40 around here. Up north in Michigan, I think of I-94, which is the road between Chicago and Detroit. Not good. Speed limit might be 70, but they'll drive 85. 6 or 8 lanes, no blinkers, all over the place, all the way across. Very many people on it. It's a road of destruction too, every day. But Jesus pictured many on the highway to eternal destruction. They don't build their house, trust their life upon the rock, which he says is these teachings of mine. More narrow is a road to life. There can be some very narrow, beautiful paths. We'll have them in the Palo Duro Canyon walking around. I think of one where I used to walk through it. Very, very narrow, and you have to know where you're going. Here. Park the car here. Go through here. Flowers and birds and up. And then you're at a big sand dune, and you can see the blue waters of the Great Lakes. smaller, fewer people. So a great big highway to destruction, house on the sand, and many, many, many more. Probably a minority or 50-50, quite a few Christians in the United States. Still a very Christian nation compared to others. But only one way. It's only this way. That's the only way to get there. And it's going to say in Acts 4:12, neither is there salvation in any other. That's Acts 4:12. Jesus in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father but by me. So it's only this way, and not all the other ways that many, many people are going on. The way to destruction, lots of people on it. A minority, at least as far as the world is concerned, a minority, fewer people to find life. In this part of the Sermon on the Mount, we can see we can try with people and love them anyway, but after a while, don't have to be around them all the time, particularly if they're not family or friends. You just don't need to wait and try later. We can withdraw. He puts them in the biting category. He puts them in the mud category, and he is going to withdraw from them eventually. And he'll talk more with the disciples. Seek, lots of seeking in the Bible. Lots of seeking in the law of the Lord. Lots of seeking what is right. Praying, asking for daily bread, but can ask for even more. It's all right to ask for more. And then we get near the end. There's only a narrow way. It's restricted. It's only Jesus. There's nowhere else, and fewer people go that way, and many of them are on the road, and many of them are building their house on the sand, which will collapse in the storm. Will the musicians please come?